We're going to call this special city council meeting of July the 24th to order. If you would call roll, please.
Coos?
Here.
Harris?
Present.
Carlson?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Severson?
Here.
West?
Here.
Zingy?
Here. Would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just as a point of information, Mayor Williams is out of town, so that's why I'm doing this. It's not stashed in my trunk or anything. For communications, we do have a hard copy of 5A. It was sent with the revised packets to us a day or so ago, but in case anyone didn't re-upload the packet, we do have 5A here. Okay. When I was back there, I didn't see anyone had signed up for persons to be heard. Is there anyone here who would like to be heard? Thank you very much. Then we'll proceed with new business. Our first order of business is resolution number 142559, municipal assistance funding pursuant to the 2016 municipal matching grant program for Ketchikan Public Utilities and the city water and wastewater capital improvement program for the Schoenbar Road water and sewer mains replacement project. Is there a motion?
Your Honor,
Mr.
I
Severson.
move the City Council approve Resolution 142559 requesting municipal assistance funding from the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation pursuant to the state fiscal year 2016 municipal matching grant program for Ketchikan Public Utilities in the city of Ketchikan water and wastewater capital improvement program, Schoenbar Road sewer main replacement project, agreeing to provide the local share of the project as required and established an effective date.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Severson, do you have any comments?
Yeah, we've submitted this one before and it got turned down. It's a fairly extensive program, so maybe I think at this time it'd be good for Public Works to come up and kind of run us through it and tell us what we all need to do. Probably the most appropriate thing, I guess. And this, we submitted once before and it didn't make, but it scored fairly high. Is that right, Seth? This one?
Good evening, council members. Seth Brackey, Assistant Public Works Director. That's correct. We've been putting in for this Schoenbar project for several attempts now. Last round we did fairly well, not quite good enough, but we're positioned this year to be right in, I think, right in the running. So I think it's a sorely needed project. Certainly you want to keep up with your infrastructure, and it takes so long for these projects to get in the pipeline and get going. Even from this word go, we're still a year or more out from construction, so I think it's really prudent to put in for this grant.
This runs from Park Avenue to
Valley Forge, which is Valley Forge, right by Valley Park School.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we had a major break there not too long ago.
We've had at least 2 there on the water line.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And that's because of bad subgrade?
I think a combination of factors, and could let John speak to that, but as far as the water line break, it's definitely age related.
And is that cast or ductile?
John, right through there, I believe, cast iron.
Was that all, Bob?
Again, and I think we're going to get further into this later on in the discussion, that as we move forward with these projects, management has stated that, of course, this thing will have to be paid for in some manner, and whatever these projects are, it's probably going to be rate related, sewer and water, in order to do that. So at some point, I'd like to figure out what the cost is associated. We're looking at a couple of, multi-million dollar bonds here and what that would take to retire those in the life of these projects.
Does anyone else have a question for Seth? Reese? Does anybody else have any comments on this? Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Harris.
Aye.
Zingy.
Aye.
Severson.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Coos.
Okay.
And that passes, I guess that we're all here, 7 to nothing. I keep thinking that was somebody who's not here, but that's just because Matt's on the phone. Resolution 5B is number 142560, a municipal assistance funding pursuant to the 2016 Municipal Matching Grant Program for Ketchikan Public Utilities and the City of Ketchikan Water and Wastewater Capital Improvement Programs. This is for Chatham Avenue water and sewer main replacement projects. Is there a motion?
Your Honor,
Mr. Sears?
I move the City Council approve resolution number 142560, requesting municipal assistance funding from the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation pursuant to the state fiscal year 2016 municipal matching grant program for Ketchikan Public Utilities and the City of Ketchikan Water and Wastewater Capital Improvement Program. Chatham Avenue Water and Sewer Main Replacement Project, agreeing to provide the local share project as required and establish an effective date.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Severson, do you have any comments?
Again, I think this is one that we've had in the queue for quite a while, and again, it's just a matter of applying for the grant. Doesn't mean we're gonna get them. But again, it's back to the fact that these are all costs and money. These are 70-30 split. And, for 70-30 money, that's probably a pretty good deal. But again, our infrastructure's failing, and we're gonna have to come back and probably explain to the ratepayers exactly what this is gonna cost.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Would you call the roll, please?
West.
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Coos.
Okay.
Harris.
Aye.
Severson.
Yes.
Zingy.
Yes. And that passes 7 to nothing. 5C is resolution number 142561, municipal assistance funding pursuant to the 2016 municipal matching grant program for Ketchikan Public Utilities in the City of Ketchikan, water and wastewater capital improvement programs. This is for Front Mill Stedman Street's water and sewer mains replacement project. Is there a motion?
Your Honor,
Mr. Severson?
I move the City Council approve resolution 142561, requesting municipal assistance funding from the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation pursuant to the state fiscal year 2016 municipal matching grant program for Ketchikan Public Utilities and the City of Ketchikan Water and Wastewater Capital Improvement Program. Front Mill Stedman Street Water and Sewer Main Replacement Project, agreeing to provide the local share of the project as required and establishing an effective date.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Severson, anything on this?
This is one that came up on us because it was part of the state's program where they were gonna come in and resurface and do new iron in the street and trim the gutters, and of course, we have infrastructure underneath that. I'm not, too sure how we're gonna continue to manage this type of a thing where, whether it's in our 10-year plan or not. They're looking at what this project's gonna cost for utilities, about $12 million more. Is that about right? Pretty rough. And we have force mains there. We've talked about doing split lining on some of those. The sewer mains in that area are fairly deep, if I remember right. 15 foot.
In different sections.
Yeah, very deep. So when you're dealing with that, that's more money. I mean, if you only have to dig a ditch 3 or 4 foot deep, that's one thing. But if you got to go down 15 feet in tidal grounds, it's a whole different story because you're working tides and other things. And then I'm not sure what the infrastructure looks like down there. I think the sewer line is concrete pipe in parts of Mill Street or something like that.
Sure, just like any good catch can project. It's all sorts of different types. Through Mill Street, yes, concrete. So we have taken the opportunity to look at this project with R&M Engineering out of Anchorage, and they've came back with a high, medium, and low option, kind of different options for which pipes to replace, which pipes that could possibly stay. Now, we've yet to present that back to this body, but we plan to. The dollar amount that's reflected here is for the high amount. It's best to apply for the highest amount for the matching grant. That way you're covered for it. So, but ultimately your question, we have force mains, gravity, different types of pipe.
So, we can go ahead and apply, but as we go through this process, you're gonna be looking at bringing us back some options, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was concerned about there. I don't know if all the infrastructure needs replacing. Again, some of it might be replaced in a different manner, like the slip lanes. And whether or not, early on, we talked about the option of putting in access points, 6-foot manholes or whatever it would be, so we can get the pipe in and go both directions, because I think you can run it only about 300 yards or something like that, effectively. That about right?
Yeah, 400 to 300, depending on the type of run, size of pipe.
Yeah, and again, you know, I'd like to do everything first cabin and do it all, but I think that what's ahead of us and what we're looking at, we're going to have to really be innovative in how we're going to do this and be able to continue to fund our infrastructure and work on it in the future. I'm concerned about our bonding capacity. Having said that, I understand that we have to continue to work on it. Thanks, Deb.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Thanks, Seth. Would you call the roll, please?
Severson,
Yes.
Coos,
Okay.
Zingy,
Yes.
Harris,
Aye.
Olson, West,
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes. And that also passes 7-0. That brings us up to 5D, resolution number 142556. This would provide for submission to the qualified voters of the city of the city at the municipal election to be held in the city on October the 7th, 2014. A proposition as to whether the city should issue municipal utility revenue bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $5 million to provide funds for water main replacement projects in Schoenbar Road, Chatham Avenue, and Front Mill and Stedman Streets. Is there a motion?
Your Honor,
Mr. Harris?
I move the city council approve resolution number 14-2556, providing for submission to the qualified voters of the city at the municipal election to be held in the city on October 7, 2014, of a proposition as to whether the city should issue municipal utility revenue bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $5 million to provide funds for water main replacement projects in Schoenbar Road, Chatham Avenue, and Front, Mill, and Stedman Streets, and establish an effective date.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Harris, do you have any comments?
Well, I fought with myself all week going, well, geez, we don't need to bond anymore. We are so far in debt. But to me, this is a need. This is not a want. We have to have infrastructure. It's not like we wanted a new library or we wanted a new museum. Well, voters did, yeah. And I'm just to the point, this is a need. And we get, if we get the bonds, we get 70% of the project paid. You can't get a much better deal than that. It's a real cheap loan if we get it. And it'll be it'll be a ratepayer thing. The voters they're kind of just voting on a rate increase, whether they get a little win now or a big win coming down the road.
So Carl, are these 15-year bonds, or what kind of bonds are these? 25?
This is going to be our 20-year revenue bond.
Okay.
We plan on issuing through the ADEC Clean Water Loan Program, and the interest rate will be about 1.5%. And if we issue the entire $5 million, we're looking at annual debt service of about $292,000.
And this one that we're working on right now is for it's for the water portion of it?
The water portion is roughly about 50-55% of the total cost.
And with our given debt service that we have and the revenues, what would we be potentially looking at in a rate in order to maintain or to pay these?
The rate increase depending on the debt that we issue and our operating costs at the time we issue the debt, we could be looking at a rate increase of up to 11%, assuming we issue the entire $5 million. And that would increase the residential monthly water rate from $46.34 to $51.44 per month. Again, that's if we issue the full $5 million.
Dick, then Judy, then Deanne.
Okay, a question. If we prove this tonight, then it's automatic. There's not a second reading on this.
Correct.
That's
And I
correct.
assume we have to pass it tonight or we're against the deadline.
My understanding, and the city attorney isn't here, but with the Supreme Court decision, I'm not sure we're falling under Department of Justice.
No, that's not a
So
factor
we're not
anymore.
driven by that timeline the way we normally have them.
So if we were to discuss this tonight, and I don't see any reporters out there, so nobody in the world's gonna know what we did to them in the paper tomorrow, that we're not gonna get any feedback except letting them vote on it. Okay. The other, because I've got some concerns that we don't disclose well enough. And so the other one is probably a lawyer's thing, but when this goes on the ballot, if I can't see that this is gonna cost me an extra $5 a month for 20 years, and the voter can't see it, then I'm not gonna approve it. So can we tweak what's on the ballot so the voter knows what the heck they're voting on? They never see it. What they see is $5 million.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't have an answer for it because we've never tried to do that before, but I can certainly find out if that's possible.
Yeah.
Councilmember Coos, if the council wants to defer this to the August 7th meeting, we should be able to get the answers that
Right.
we're looking for.
Yeah, we can do that. We just have to have this thing approved before August 25th because that's when the city clerk's office needs to have the ballot ready.
Okay, I'll hold my questions in until everybody else has got comment.
Judy?
My question was similar to Dick, so that one's been answered, but I guess, and I don't know who this question is for, and if we know that our infrastructure is in such bad shape, and obviously it's been this way for a long time, why are we just getting the bond now? Why didn't we do that before the library and before the fire station and before, why didn't we put this one out there first? This one to me seems so much more critical, I guess.
We had a number of water and sewer projects that had been approved by the voters, including what we did at the water treatment plant. When we get voter authorization to do those types of projects, they're generally for 10 years, and that 10-year term has expired. So like, we had approval to do Schoenbar, but that approval has since gone away. So right now, we don't have any water or sewer projects approved for any type of bonding. So this is why we're bringing these three projects forward at this time.
Okay, so this isn't like the first time this council's heard about these projects. It's just, okay, that's what I kind of
And
wanted.
there's one other factor too. We are trying to acquire grants, and issuing the debt coincides with when the grants were approved by the state, and because of the 10-year limitation, we can only plan for so much in a certain period of time. Grant money doesn't materialize, then we don't issue bonds.
I just think that it's important that the public understand that too, so that they just, because one of the questions that I had today, people read the packet, they go, well, explain to me why you guys went ahead with the library and you went ahead with the fire station and you didn't take care of the infrastructure. So I think it's important that we let folks know that this isn't the first time we've.
I can cite you Tongass Phase 1, Tongass Phase 2, Jackson, Monroe. I mean, we have been trying to sequence these projects over the last several years.
That's great, thank you.
Deanna and then Bob?
You had mentioned about an 11% increase for the cost of the bonding. Aren't we scheduled to have incremental increases in the rates already that were approved recently?
We did a rate study and recommendations were brought forth to the council. The council has yet to act on those recommendations, so.
So wasn't there, didn't we do some type of rate increase?
Oh, yes, we did an 8% rate increase
Yeah.
effective this year. But the rate study that we had performed by FCS included many of these projects that we're talking about. So their rate increase projection assumed these projects were going to be built and they would be funded 70-30
Okay.
grant money.
Okay. And then I think you answered this already, but if this voters approve for bonding, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go out and get the bonds and spend the money. It just means that the opportunity is there if we get these grants.
Exactly, because we have to bring back an ordinance in order to issue the bonds, and that will require a first reading, a second reading, and a public hearing. So there'll be another opportunity to say yea or nay with
So it's-
regard to issuing the debt.
So it's just basically getting our ducks in a row to have available should these other opportunities come into place.
Correct. We won't know until December whether any of the projects have been included in the governor's budget. So the ballot propositions will be going in October. So we're just trying to position ourselves to maximize the opportunities if they become available.
Is there anything else? Bob?
If you look at page 5 of 5A, down there, the fourth paragraph or the second paragraph under the history status, it talks about the fact that the Stone Bar project is one of the main arterials, and it's feeding the two major fish plants, processing plants. And in particular, the usage by the fish processors and U.S. Coast Guard basically taxing the Water Division's ability to supply their needs. Last 2 years, we've had discussions with the fish processors about the volume that they're using and the price that they're paying. The studies that we have shown that there's a great disparity there. So they had, at those meetings, said they were going to come back to us with some information and stuff. And I don't think we've received anything back from them at this point. So at this point, before we move forward with the overall rate increase, I'd like to see a rate increase specifically to the major users of our water system, and we need to raise those rates. And I think we need to have some kind of a process within the next 5 years where we bring them up to where they're supposed to be in regards to the study that we've had in place. And so I'd like to see that brought forward in the future agenda item if we could, because we need to do that. They haven't brought us back anything, and so to me it's more like a delay in action. And so I think that we need to move forward with the rate increase for the fish processors and the other large users of the, whether it be the Coast Guard base or everybody else, but maybe it's volume-based metered time or something, but we need to do that.
Dick?
So Bob, you mentioned that the study we did, it had a rate increase proposal in there, and we increased rates last year by 8%. So what would staff be recommending with, say we don't do this, what's the rate increase recommended for next year?
If I recall correctly, it's been a while since I've looked at the report. I believe it would call for another 8% rate increase.
So that's 8% plus 11%.
No. The 8% rate for next year and future years, I think it goes out for about a 5-year period. Assume that we would be issuing debt for these projects. So if you debt for these projects, the rate increases in the FCS study would not apply. It would be a different rate increase.
What we were trying to show in this report, if the council elects not to implement the rate increases recommended by FCS, if we needed to fund these projects through the ADEC low-interest loan program, it would require an 11% increase if they were going to stand alone.
Okay.
And
So-
that 11% is built into the FCS rate.
So if the 11% is built in, then how many years in a row do we have to do 8%?
It depends, according to the FCS study, if you built all the projects within the 5-year CIP, I think we were looking at a rate increase every year for about 5 years, roughly 8%. Either 6 or 8%, I can't remember exactly what the percentage is.
So 40% increase.
Yes, it was substantial.
The other thing to keep in mind is the FCS, I don't believe, addressed two-point chlorination or the issues we're having with coliforms and the raw water supply, or if the council elects to move towards filtration, those costs have not been programmed in the FCS study.
Anything else? Would you call her for it, please?
Zingy,
Yes.
Coos,
No.
West,
Yes.
Harris,
Aye.
Severson,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
And that, excuse me, that passes 6-1. Resolution number E, or, excuse me, agenda item E, resolution number 142557, providing for submission to the qualified voters of the city at the municipal election to be held in the city on October the 7th, 2014, a proposition as to whether the city should issue wastewater revenue bonds in a principal amount not to exceed $5 million to provide funds for sewer main replacement projects in Schoenbar, Chatham Avenue, and Front, Mill, and Stedman Streets. Is there a motion?
Your Honor,
Excuse me, Mr. Severson?
I move the city council approve resolution 142557, providing for the submission of the qualified voters of the city at a municipal election to be held in the city on October 7th, 2014, of a proposition to whether the city should issue wastewater revenue bonds in the principal amount not to exceed $5 million to provide funds for the sewer main replacement project in Schoenbar Road, Chatham Avenue, and Front Mill and Stedman Street, and establish an effective date not to exceed.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Severson?
So the wastewater rates are somewhat different than water rates. What we have programmed in is going to cover these projects also. And what was that? How much is that a year?
Yeah. The debt service payments would be identical to the water debt, roughly $292,000. And that would translate to about a 14% increase in rate. And that means the residential wastewater rate would go from $42.85 per month to $48.85 per month, roughly $6 per month. Again, that assumes we issue all the debt.
And what do we have programmed in the study?
Again, those rate increases are either 6 or 8%, I can't remember which, but again, it goes off for a 5-year period. If you're looking at rate increases every year for 5 years. And these projects were included in that rate study. They were part of the 5-year CIP that we presented to FCS for the rate study.
So Carl, do these particular utility projects cover the cost for asphalt sidewalks
I'm gonna have to defer to Mr. Brocky. I believe
and
they do.
drainage stuff?
Councilmember Severson, the question was, does the estimate shown include asphalt, road repair, along with the utilities? That was the question?
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah, these estimates do include the road reconstruction as well, along with the storm drain.
along with the storm drain, so it's tied into the utility project.
Correct.
Is that shared fairly equally between them, or is it?
Correct. That follows the model that we've been following on Tongass Phase 1, Phase 2, Alaska Avenue, and Jackson Street.
And those have worked out fairly well as far as cost-wise?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Seth.
Well, in this last one we just voted on, we glossed over the fact that on the ballot, what are we gonna show the public?
We can come back at the meeting of August 7th. We can talk to bond council and see.
Okay, so it's not gonna be in conference, otherwise I'm gonna move to defer it, because I think until we get an answer, I'm not gonna say yes on this at all.
Bob?
Well, I guess my answer to that is, we did a study that took into consideration our operational needs and our capital outlays, and they put in a projected rate increase associated with that. And so when we go out to the bonds, I think that's what we need to point to, is that there is a plan. And yes, it's gonna cost some money, but I think this isn't out of character with what other communities are struggling with. Juneau, I think, is the closest example that you have that are in a similar position that we're in. But I know that there are other communities doing the same thing. But I agree with Dick, is that when they're voting on the bond issue, they need to realize that they're also voting on the rate increase that's gonna support that. It has to.
And that's all I'm wanting to do, is I want the public to know that over a 5-year period, they're gonna want to probably see a 50% increase in their rates, so that they can say yay or nay, rather than being say, oh yeah, we gotta fix the water and sewer.
Excuse me, I don't think anyone here is being cavalier about the need for a rate increase, but my question is, if we didn't proceed with this project, what would happen? I mean, are we looking at a collapse in those systems?
Well, depending on what project you want to talk about, the Chatham project, it's not a question of if that system's going to fail, it's a question of when it will fail, just like it was on Hawkins Denali. So if you don't do a project like that, and the system subsequently fails, you not only have the cost to deal with the emergency situation, you still have the cost to go in and replace the system. So doing nothing really leads to a far greater cost in the long term, just like all deferred maintenance leads to a greater cost.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to put, I agree with Dick. I think it's reasonable to put something on the ballot so voters know that there is a cost associated with this. But I think when the run-up to the election, we need to make it really clear what the consequences are of not proceeding with these projects. And I'm sure that you've got that well in mind when we're getting closer to that. Anybody else? Comments? Questions?
Yeah, I'm real comfortable with the Schoenbar project and the Chatham project. I know that those are two projects that have been around for a long time that have some serious issues. I have a problem with the way that we ended up with the Stedman and Mill Street, because the state's moving into that project. And I don't know what would happen if we didn't do anything to the infrastructure and they paved over it. Are we looking at an immediate collapse, or is it one of those things where in the next 5-10 years we're going to be digging some holes in the street and fixing some waters and sewers? And I don't know. So that's the only one in my mind that I have some questions about moving forward with. The state kind of put us in this predicament. Yeah, it's a part of our infrastructure, but it really wasn't on the plan, from what I understood, at this major intersection here.
Judy, did you have something?
Yeah, I agree with Dick. I'd like to see something on the ballot that tells people exactly what they're voting for and how much it's going to cost, because I think that's what it comes down to. And then, do we do all of these projects together? Like, is it possible to defer?
They'll be staggered. There's no way that we have the the resources internally to handle 3 projects simultaneously of that magnitude.
So how does this work? We bond for all of them, and then,
We would only bond as we do a project. You don't go
Okay.
out and borrow the 5 million and then,
that's what I wondered.
do the projects one at a time. Each project you draw down the debt as the project goes forward.
But just a comment, in the end, you're bonded for $10 million, 5 on each one of them.
Right.
In the end, when you're done, you've bonded for all of it.
And if we don't spend the full 10
Yeah.
million, it would, whatever.
It'll be a little less.
Right.
But it's not like, oh, I'm gonna get by with this because I only bonded for one project this year. Next year, you're gonna bond for the next one, and next year, you're gonna bond for the next one. So in the end, you've done whatever the amount is for the whole period. And the public just needs to understand all of it. I think we do, and we probably see the need for this, but sometimes voters think we snooper them, and I don't wanna be considered being snoopered.
Anyone else? Would you call roll, please?
Carlson,
Yes?
Harris,
Aye.
Olson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Coos,
Okay.
Severson,
Yes.
Zingy.
Yes.
And that passes 7-0. Excuse me, I'm getting some kind of cold. The reason for the special session is our next agenda item, and this is the KPU budget planning session and the budget planning session for general government. When I found out I hadn't really thought how to approach this because I thought Lou was going to be here. So I've been trying to figure out the best approach to begin a discussion like this, and it seems like the last time we did this, everyone took a turn at talking about their priorities and some of their concerns. We do have the department heads here to answer any questions. Does someone else have a better idea of how they would like to approach this discussion? I'm certainly open to suggestions. Okay, hearing none. Then why don't we'll just, I'll ask Dick to go first, since he's sitting there in the prime position, and talk about his thoughts about the upcoming budget, and then we will proceed from there. Mr. Coos?
Well, I would probably say just simply a couple of things. One is that we've got to figure out a better way to do this, and I'm gonna think out loud that I sort of like the way the borough has about a 4 to 6 hour session where the staff comes up and tells us where they are and what they're doing and going and so forth. Because right now, I would almost question whether anybody sitting here knows what's going on out there and where the status is. And the other one is that in my opinion right now, the economy's not that good, and we've still got to continue to try not to increase our budget. And I'm not going to say where that's going to come from. Staff's probably got a pretty good idea. Probably still once again looking at attrition. If we don't fill positions, that's saves us some money. There's going to be capital projects that maybe we have to delay. And like I say, I don't have a good handle on where those all are, but to me, the taxes don't go up and the budget don't go up. If anything, the budget has to be whole down. That's just, and I hate to be that general. I really do, but that's kind of where I am.
Does anybody have any comments or questions that they want to talk with Dick about his opinion? Judy?
Well, I certainly don't want to see taxes go up. I think with the rates increases that we're proposing, I'd be curious to see how many of the positions that we had last budget that weren't filled, if any of those remain not filled. And maybe attrition is one way to look at the budget. But I think we also, and I'm going to take the hit for it, but I really think we need to look at how we fund the community grants. I think, we're making a lot of cuts. We have a lot of projects that we have to get done, and giving out $358,000, we're going to have to look at cutting that. And it's just where I sit with it.
Any comments or questions about what Judy had to say? Deanne?
Well, I think Judy's probably going down the correct road. I remember in our budget discussions last year, there was some sentiment that it was before the holidays and no one wanted to see positions be cut or services reduced or things like that, and we somehow managed to bring it all together. I don't think we're going to be that fortunate year after year after year. I think at some point we're going to have to, unfortunately, make some very hard and unpopular decisions about things. I don't know how else to go about it unless we can figure out how to grow money, and it doesn't look like it's possible. So at the end of the day, it's either raise taxes and expenses, which isn't popular, or decrease services and the cost for them, which isn't popular either. But at some point, it has to be balanced.
Thank you. Anybody else? Matt? You still there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Can.
All right. Yeah, no, I think tonight's motions that we've approved are indicative of where we're at, and I think that, you know, as we look at our budget and as we look at moving forward, I say this all the time. I believe that our government should be stable. I believe that it should be there to serve the people. And when I start talking and we start talking about cuts, we start talking about programs, and we start talking about personnel who are manning those programs. And I like the level of programs that we have. I think it's our job to find ways to make other savings. But I also think that we need to understand that we have to pay for them. I'm not afraid to say that we have to pay for them, and I'm not afraid of trying to come up with ways to do that. The thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to start cutting programs and cutting staff to the point where we then have a program that operates at 3/4. I don't want to have that. I don't want to have a streets crew that's any more reduced. I don't want to have a library that gets further reduced hours. I don't want to have a museum department that gets further reduced. I think all of those are viable programs, and I think as a whole, when we look at our community and we look at the city of Ketchikan, I think the residents believe that way because by and large they've supported the bonds that we've brought forward, because they're not the bonds that we brought forward in the past, the bonds that we're bringing forward now, they're not frivolous. These are bonds that we need to have in order to have a safe and a well-rounded community. So I wasn't in favor of last year's zero budget, and I'm not in favor of doing something like that again, because we have to understand that everyone is affected by inflation, including governmental entities, and we need to take that into account and allow for that, and do what we can to fund it in a way that doesn't hurt us as a community, but B, in a way that allows us to continue to progress and take care of the issues that are facing us at this time.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for anything Matt said? Okay. Thanks, Matt. Bob?
I think there's a lot of good ideas that are already discussed around the table. I think that we have to do, though, is we have to look at our present rate structure and make sure that people are paying for the services that they're getting and fully paying for those. I think that in the electrical stuff, there need to be some step rates or demand meter stuff on the some of the electrical use in regards to radiant heat. There's some issues there, I think, that have to be looked at that are taxing us. I think in the water systems and in the sewer systems, we have some disparity in classes that need to be looked at. I think that our residential rates are carrying a significant portion of that load of debt service, and that the rates have to be looked at and seeing where There's some subsidies or there's some inequities there that need to be addressed, rather than just do a blanket type raise. Whether that's gonna bring in any excess revenue, I think is something that we're gonna have to look at. I do agree with Matt that there are certain services and programs that are necessary. I think that we need to take care of our needs first and then look towards whatever that may be in the way of wants. But we are providing good services at a reasonable cost right now. It's always tough when you start cutting personnel. It might be the biggest dollar spent by a governmental agency, but those services are important. Police, fire, public works, all of the utilities that we have. When we have storms and issues, those guys are out there taking care of our community. So we do have to get innovative, and I think one of the things we're gonna have to do is really look hard at our capital spending. And, we may have to move some of those projects out to a later date and slim it down what we're doing by year, because we're not getting the influx of capital from state grants and subsidies that we have in the past, and there's just not enough money, it seems, to go around every year. So, it's gonna be a tough budget season to try to make this stuff all work. But I think that we're gonna have to really pay attention to the little things to make the big thing continue to move.
Any comments or questions about what Bob said? KJ?
This is a hard job. It's all revenue. So we gotta bring in more money or find a way to get everything paid for like we're talking. One of the things Judy brought up, or excuse me, Councilman Zingy, I don't want to be that friendly. She was talking about all the property that the city owns around town, that maybe there's some properties that are being not used, buildings, spaces. Maybe we can sell them. I mean, just things to look at that we can get back on the tax rolls instead of just owning property. There are buildings that are falling apart. We have to rebuild. We have a lot of things to do and no money to do it with. That's the problem. And I don't think any of us here are even remotely thinking about a tax increase. I think we got that last year and it ain't gonna happen again. So it's gonna be real tough to find where we're gonna get the money, where we're gonna make the cuts, what we're gonna do. I'm not really looking forward to this. I know you guys are, but I'm not.
As for me, my opinion falls mostly in line with Matt's, and since I'm not running for re-election, I won't belabor that point. Carl, I think Dick makes an interesting point about having a meeting where we have longer presentations by the department heads. The way it's set up right now, it's necessarily jammed up. We have the election in October. We have to have the budget finished by the end of December. How likely is that we could have, what, are you looking like a half-hour presentation, 15, 20 minutes kind of thing?
I'm just referring to the borough, and I think some of them are longer, some of them are shorter, depending on what it is. But it needs to be far enough ahead of time. It probably should have been something we would have done a couple of months ago, which would have gave staff time to react to whatever decisions we may make as a result of it. So I don't know if we can do it now or not.
Well, because that is included in they do have a report of what their department's done and planning to do when we have the budget.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of curious what it is that you are seeking.
It was kind of maybe listening to things and what's going on out there, like we are tonight. Well, we're talking tonight off the top of our heads and what little knowledge we have. But if we'd had that and then we'd said, okay, we want to do this at the end of that meeting, then I think we would be giving more informed direction to the staff. But I think staff's got to start on the budget now, and it's too late to hit it this year. But I think next year, whoever's sitting here needs to think about doing something like that a month or better earlier than this, so that there's a chance.
Councilmember Coos, I understand what you're saying, and if you want to follow the borough model, from my perspective, you wouldn't want to have that session any later than April.
And that may be true. I mean, it's something we could do and give staff time to deal with it. But I'm with Carl. It's the timing on it, and we waited too late right now. So, but otherwise, that's what I was up to.
Anybody else?
maybe-
Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, anybody else have any thoughts on that? Okay. We do have a lot of the department heads here this evening. Does anyone have any specific questions or concerns or comments they would like to bring to the attention of any of our fine department heads? Okay, seeing none?
Well,
Yeah, please, go ahead.
You know, I really appreciate all the work they do and they manage the budgets, and sometimes we're not aware of all the stuff that they have to take care of on a daily basis to make the operation of the city run. But they're the ones that are on the front line, and anything that they can do to help the council struggle with the issues that we have, that certainly would be appreciated. In the same way, you have some very good employees, long-term employees that have been working for the city. It wouldn't hurt to get input from them back through your departments if there's something that we're missing. You know, we're not out there working on the street every day. We're not looking at this failed infrastructure, but there may be something that will help us. And you know, it may not be a big thing, but it's going to come down to a point where we're going to be cutting things and moving monies around, and so any small amount that could help us out with that would be make a good thing for us.
Oh,
Just one more comment. I'm trying to think back to the budgets, but almost every year I've been here, there's been one piece of the budget that really bothers me. And that's the way, I'll say, we get money to feed public works, like, and I'm gonna use the landfill and some other places as an example. We tag them for money to feed public works. Sometimes the work doesn't get done, sometimes it does get done, but it seems like there's gotta be a better way to be accountable for the money that we take from those departments, feed public works back. Does it relate to the job really being done, or are we just feeding them? And I think Bob knows the spreadsheet I'm talking about. Carl probably knows the spreadsheet, and I don't know whether I got an answer, except I can't relate them back to work getting done. And whether there's a way to do it, I don't know. I know Bob knows what I'm talking about.
Jason?
If I could make
Please.
a couple brief comments. You know, I understand, I think, the objectives of the council, and regarding the general fund, based on the numbers that Bob looked up, I think we can come pretty close to achieving what the council wants to achieve. KPU is a different story, and I tried to emphasize this in my report, and I just feel compelled to emphasize it one more time. Next year, you're gonna have almost $2 million more in debt that you didn't have this year. That's gonna have to be dealt with. And if you think that I can cut $2 million out of the KPU budget to pay the $2 million in debt, that's a pretty aggressive goal if you want me to go down that road. More importantly, and we have tried to stress this the last 3 or 4 years, this year, of the approximately $6.4 million in capital spending that this council appropriated, $5.3 million of that was funded either from grants or reserves. And what that tells you is your current rate structure is not sufficient for you to be investing back into the utility. And our electric division, our water division, our telecommunications division, by their very nature, and Bob and Dick, I know you know this from your work associated with SEPA, is very capital intensive. And if your revenues are not going to allow you to reinvest back into your utilities, you got a major issue that you got to start giving some thought to. And that's going to be the challenge over the next couple of years from where I sit. You know, general government will sort itself out, but the real challenge is KPU, and you're not going to get there by cutting your way to fiscal balance. It's just not possible. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, a question. Carl, in your cover memo, you talked about, part of the issue being Whitman Lake and part of it being the implementation of the new 4G LTE. When do we start seeing a payback on that $5 million that we, quote, loaned to get that thing going?
The revenues are now materializing. We're doing data as we speak. Voice will come next year. I had this conversation with the telecommunications division manager. We are going to start paying back that loan in 2015. Regardless, if the revenues aren't there to do it, we'll be making reductions on the capital side to make those loan repayments. So you'll see that in the next budget.
Anything else in regards to the budget? Okay. Well, Mayor and council comments, we'll start this way. KJ? Is that no?
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay. Bob?
No, I don't have anything, thank you.
Dan? Matt?
No.
Dan?
No.
Judy?
No.
Dick?
No, thank you.
I just have one comment. And there was an article in the paper this past weekend about, I think it was the University of Alaska Fairbanks were doing watershed studies. And they were talking about the extreme changes that the watersheds in the southeast were going through. And I was just wondering if that had any bearing on the changes in the source of our water. And so perhaps Mr. Kleininger or someone could just take a look at that article and see if it had any relevance and let me know, or just stick something in the packet for next time. It was on the second page. It was in the second section of the weekend paper. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. So done. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the managers for coming.